I never fully understood that social media thing. To me, it was just screens full of people showing pieces of their lives, as if the whole world needed to know what they were eating or where they were. But for Valeria, my 15-year-old daughter, it was something more. It was her passion, her job, her way of connecting with the world. She was always bright and full of ideas, and when she started gaining followers, I felt proud. "Dad, this is just the beginning," she would tell me with that smile that lit up even the darkest corner of the house. But then everything changed. At first, they were harmless messages. "You are beautiful, I love your content." Things like that. Valeria would read them out loud, laughing, while I tried to understand why she cared so much about strangers' opinions. Then the messages became more intense. "You are mine. No one will understand you like I do. You should be more careful with what you post." She tried to downplay it, but I could see how her smile faded a little every time she opened her phone. One night I heard her crying in her room. When I walked in, I found her sitting on the bed, hugging her legs with her phone thrown to the side. "Dad, I don't know what to do," she said, her voice trembling. She showed me the messages. They were threats. Photos of herself edited in grotesque ways, even addresses of places she frequented. "Do they know where I live, Dad?" she whispered. I felt a cold chill run down my spine. We reported it to the police, but they couldn't do much. "Block them or ignore them," they said, as if that was enough. Valeria deleted her account. She changed her number. She even stopped going out for a while. But the messages kept coming. It was like someone was watching from nearby, waiting for the perfect moment to attack. Then the day she disappeared, everything seemed normal. She had gone to record a video in a nearby park, something simple without giving many details. "Don't worry, Dad, I'm going to be okay," she told me before leaving. And that was the last time I saw her. Hours later, I received a notification on my phone. It was a post from her, but it wasn't like the others. The photo was dark, almost unrecognizable, and the message said, "No one will find me in time." I tried to call her, but her phone was off. I ran to the park. I asked the neighbors. I called her friends. But nobody knew anything. Valeria had disappeared. The days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months. The police found no clues, and I felt increasingly powerless. The social media that was once her world was now only a constant reminder of her absence. Her followers posted theories. Some said she faked her disappearance for fame. Others claimed she had run away from something. But I knew the truth. Something bad had happened to her. Something very bad. And then the rumors started. In a distant neighborhood, people talked about a woman who seemed to be crying at night. At first, I didn't think it had anything to do with my daughter. But then, I dreamed about her. She was standing in front of me, wearing that white dress she loved so much, looking at me with those sad eyes I missed so much. "Dad," she whispered, "look for me?" The rumors kept coming, and in a way I couldn't explain, they started to feel significant. A neighborhood on the outskirts of the city, an abandoned alley, a spectral figure appearing at night. People said it was a young woman dressed in white, weeping and searching for comfort. Some claimed to have seen her from afar. Others said they only heard her voice, a moan that chilled the blood. At first, I dismissed it. What could a ghost have to do with my daughter? But something inside me wouldn't let it go. Maybe it was desperation. Maybe it was the hope of finding something, anything, that would lead me to Valeria. So, one night, armed with a flashlight and a picture of her, I headed to that place. Through some friends and casual conversation, I learned that one of their sons had seen the ghost, and that she reminded him of Valeria. The area was also close to the park where she was last seen. The place was just as eerie as they had described. Empty streets, broken streetlights, a silence that seemed to swallow every sound. The alley was at the end of a dead-end street, surrounded by piles of rotting garbage. I stopped for a moment, feeling the weight of fear pressing on my chest. I didn't know what I was doing there, if I really believed in ghosts. Then I heard it. A low moan, almost imperceptible, as if someone were crying in the distance. My heart raced. Was it Valeria? I called out, but only heard the echo of my own voice. I moved forward cautiously, illuminating every corner with the flashlight. The garbage crunched under my feet, and the air smelled rotten. Suddenly, a shadow passed in front of me, so fast I almost lost sight of it. "Valeria!" I screamed, running toward where I had seen the movement, but there was no one there. only a cold wind that made my skin crawl. I stopped, panting, my mind racing. Was I imagining things? Was it exhaustion after months of searching? Then I saw her. At the end of the alley, under the dim light of the moon, she was there. My Valeria, or at least something that looked like her. She wore that same white dress, torn and dirty. Her hair fell in disarray over her pale face. But what struck me most were her eyes. Those eyes I had loved so much, now empty, filled with infinite sadness. "Valeria," I whispered, reaching out to her. The apparition did nothing. But I knew it was her. Her face, her features, everything was the same. She just looked at me with an expression that shattered my heart. Then, she pointed to a pile of garbage beside her. I wanted to ask her what it meant, to step closer, but before I could take a step, she disappeared, as if she had never been there at all. I stood frozen, my heart pounding so hard I thought it would burst. The next day, I returned to the alley, this time with tools. I didn't tell anyone where I was going. They would think I was insane. But I didn't care. If there was even the smallest chance of finding my daughter, I had to take it. I began to dig through the pile of garbage where Valeria had pointed. The smell was unbearable. Every shovelful felt like an impossible effort. But I didn't stop. I couldn't stop. Then, I found it. A piece of fabric, torn and stained, but unmistakable. It was the dress Valeria had been wearing the last time I saw her. My hands trembled as I kept digging. And finally, I found something that made me stumble, gasping. A pale, cold arm peeking out from the garbage. I fell to my knees, crying, screaming her name. I didn't want to believe it. I couldn't accept it. A part of me had already resigned myself to the fact that I had lost Valeria. But to find her like this, it was unbearable. My daughter, my Valeria. The only thing I had left, buried under a pile of garbage, discarded as if she were worthless. I called the police. When they arrived, they confirmed what I already knew. She had been there all along, waiting for someone to find her. As the officers did their job, I stayed there, staring at the spot where the specter had appeared. After burying my daughter's remains, I thought I would find some peace, but it wasn't to be. The nights became longer and colder. And although Valeria no longer appeared in the alley, her presence seemed to have moved into my mind. I dreamed of her pale face, her eyes full of sadness. "Dad," she told me in those dreams. They wouldn't stop. I didn't understand what else I could do. The police had closed the case, saying they didn't have enough evidence to continue investigating. But I couldn't accept that. Something told me a piece was missing, something Valeria wanted me to find. So I decided to check her computer. I had never done it before because I respected her privacy even after her death. But now I had no choice. I turned on the computer, expecting a password to stop me, but it didn't. Valeria had left everything open, as if she knew that someday I would need to get in. When the investigation began, the police found her phone, but everything had been erased. They never asked me to check her computer. I didn't know why, but I pressed on. I found a lot of things, and among those files I discovered something that made my hair stand on end. A hidden folder full of screenshots and deleted messages. Using a data recovery program, I managed to restore some of them. They were conversations with a man. At first, he seemed kind, even charming. He made promises to Valeria, telling her that he would help her grow her online presence, that nobody understood her like he did. We can do great things together. But little by little, the tone changed. The messages became darker, more possessive. "If you don't come, you'll regret it," one said. "Nobody will believe you if you talk," said another. And then I found the screenshot that changed everything. An image of a map marking the location of the park and a photo of the man with his back turned. He was wearing a cap and a dark jacket. Valeria had written, "I met him. I don't know if it's a good idea, but I need answers." Immediately I wondered, was this the man who had been harassing her? Was he the one who led to her death? But there were no names, no clear photos, just vague clues. However, one of the screenshots showed a partial phone number. It wasn't much, but it was something. I kept calling that number over and over again, but no one answered. Until one night, someone did. They didn't say anything. They just breathed on the other end of the line. "Who are you?" I asked, trying to stay calm. The only response was a whisper. "Come to the abandoned warehouse on Juarez Street. Come alone." I didn't think twice. I grabbed the gun I had hidden and headed over. The warehouse was an old building with broken windows and walls covered in graffiti. The moment I stepped inside, a chill ran down my spine. That's when I saw him. It was him. The man from the photos. He was sitting in the corner with his head in his hands. He looked haggard, like he hadn't slept in weeks. When he saw me, his eyes widened in fear. "Are you?" I asked, my hand gripping the gun in my pocket. I was ready to finish that son of a— "You killed my daughter!" I shouted. The man shook his head, his voice trembling. "No, I didn't mean to. I just wanted to scare her so she'd understand that she couldn't ignore me." But she resisted, and then everything spiraled out of control. I felt an anger I had never experienced before. I wanted to make him pay for what he had done to Valeria. But before I could move, he spoke again, his voice even more desperate. "She won't leave me alone," he whimpered. "Every night she's there, watching me. I can't sleep. I can't eat. She says things to me. She tells me I'm going to regret it. Please, make it stop." His words stopped me in my tracks. He was telling me that Valeria's spirit had been tormenting him. For a moment, I didn't know what to believe. But then something strange happened. The lights in the warehouse flickered. A gust of cold wind rushed through the space. The man screamed, covering his head as if something invisible was attacking him. "Leave me alone! Leave me alone!" He was crying, pleading for forgiveness. At that moment, I knew. Valeria was there. She was guiding me one last time. I called the police, and when they arrived, the man confessed to everything. He was arrested and sentenced to decades in prison. Decades that he never served because he ended up taking his own life. Justice wasn't enough. Nothing ever would be. But at least it had an ending, and I hadn't been the one to deliver it. After that, something changed. The nightmares stopped. I no longer felt that cold, sad presence that had followed me for months. Valeria had finally found peace. But I was still here, with the memory of what I had lost. And though I knew I would never get her back, at least I could rest knowing that her murderer had paid for what he did. Time passed, but the pain didn't. Although Valeria's murderer was gone and her spirit no longer appeared in the alley or my dreams, something in me remained broken. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her. Her smile, her hair in the wind, her voice calling "Dad." It was as if a part of her had stayed with me, trapped in this world, as if I couldn't fully let go. After a while, I became something I never imagined I would be, an activist. I started speaking in schools and communities, on social media. I warned young people about the dangers of online harassment. I told Valeria's story, not as a victim, but as a person full of dreams and hope. I showed them the screenshots I had saved, the messages she received. "This happened to my daughter," I would say. "I don't want it to happen to you." The talks were difficult. Sometimes I saw parents crying. Sometimes I saw young people staring at their phones in fear. But I knew this was necessary. Valeria's loss had not been in vain. Her story was saving lives. That gave me a little comfort. But there was something I never told anyone, something only I knew. Sometimes, on the quietest nights, I felt her. I didn't see her, I didn't hear her, but I felt her presence, like a whisper in the air, like a breeze that brushed against my skin. At first, I thought my imagination was playing tricks on me, but then strange things started happening. One night, as I prepared a presentation, my computer turned on by itself. On the screen was a photo of Valeria, one I didn't remember ever seeing. She was smiling, wearing that white dress she loved so much. And the dreams, they returned. But this time they were different. She wasn't sad. She was at peace, walking through a field of flowers. I think she was asking me to let her go. And that was the hardest part. She was all I had left of a life I once shared with someone so special. But I knew I had to do it, because holding on to her memory wouldn't keep her alive. One afternoon, I went to the cemetery and sat by her grave. I talked to her. I told her everything I had done, all the lives her story had touched. I told her that I missed her and always would. But I understood now. It was time for her to rest. At that moment, I felt warmth in the air, as if the sun had suddenly risen. I knew she was there, listening. And then she was gone. But her memory will live forever, because love doesn't end with death. It only changes form. And Valeria, my daughter, my light, will always be with me.